Hello and welcome to your local science channel, all here for your science needs. Today I'm here to talk to you about GMOs. Who am I, you might ask? Why, I'm Scientist Sam, vetted with 42 years of experience from the University of Science. So you know, you can trust me. Like I said, our topic today is GMOs, and we're going to learn about what they are, the history, pros and cons, examples, the future of GMOs, and of course, my opinion, because every news channel is biased. Let's start first with what GMOs are. Are you consuming them? Are you giving them to your children? Are they in your household? In your kitchen? Are you using them right now? Probably. GMOs are genetically modified organisms. Now, to simple that out, they are an animal, plant, or microbe whose DNA has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. Now you might be thinking, what is this new funky science that you're talking about, Science Sam? I never heard of this, and if I have, it's brand new. Well, I gotta tell you, it is not brand spanking new. It is very, very old, okay? GMOs have been around since as early as 8000 BCE, where they used traditional methods such as crossbreeding and selective breeding. What are these traditional methods? I'm gonna tell you. Conventional methods include selective breeding and crossbreeding. Crossbreeding is mating two different organisms together to form a hybrid species. Now before we talk about hybrid species, let's just talk about the selective breeding, which is basically just seeing one chubby chicken and a chubby rooster and getting them together to get chubbier chickens for dinner. Or chickens that produced a lot of eggs this season, mating them so that they can produce even more eggs the next season. So hybrid species do exist. You're probably thinking to yourself, what, like the platypus? No, those are 100% natural. Don't ask me how. I don't know. It's crazy. But some that are genetically modified animals as hybrid species, include a mule, which is a female horse and a male donkey mixed together, and they end up sterile. We also have durum wheat, which has twice the amount of chromosomes as it should. This is because it is mixed with two diploid wheats and one sweetgrass, which ends up with a tetraploid durum wheat that we consume. After that, we have a liger. Yes, they are real. I've seen pictures. I actually have personal experience with a liger. He came up to me, gave me a hug, very kind. Let's get more in depth to the history of GMOs you see here. So I mentioned that in 8000 BCE we were using traditional methods, but it gets even crazier than that. The first genetically engineered plants to be produced for human consumption, according to my good friends at the National Geographic, were introduced in 1920. 22 actually. But even as early as 1866, Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk, breeds two different types of peas, because he's got nothing better to do, and identifies basic processes of genetics, like how colors of one mixed with another may make a different color, or how many colors of each are you going to get, tall plants and short plants, wrinkled peas and smooth peas. He took a lot of detailed notes. In 1922, just like our good friends at National Geographic talked about, the first hybrid corn was produced and sold commercially. That's right, your great-grandma was buying GMOs. Well, probably your grandma was buying GMOs. It depends on who's watching. In 1940, radiation or chemicals were used to randomly change an organism's DNA. Were they trying to make giant squash? Probably. Did they succeed? No, but they figured some stuff out. In 1953, the structure of DNA is identified as a double helix, that it has nitrogen bases, that it has a phosphate, that it has a hydrogen bond, all that good stuff. In 1973, biochemists developed engineering by inserting DNA from one bacteria into another. And in 1982, human insects insulin, that's right, insulin, not food, is the first consumer GMO developed through genetic engineering, and it is approved by the FDA because we need their approval. Please approve us. In 1994, GMO tomato, which was first created through genetic engineering, is sold after federal agencies improved for it to be as safe as traditionally bred tomatoes. And we all know we trust the federal government, right? And as early as 2015, the FDA approved application for the first genetically engineered animal for food, which is salmon. That was a salmon. In 2016, a law was passed to require labels on GMOs so all you people can be informed about which of your foods have GMOs. Newsflash, it's almost all of them. I also want to mention that in the 1990s, we get genetically modified squash, soybeans, cotton, corn, papayas, tomatoes, potatoes, and canola. Canola are flowers. Did you know that? They're little yellow flowers. Look it up. So that's the good old history of GMOs. Next, I want to talk about some examples of GMOs, specifically in food, now that you know what they are. 94% of the soybeans planted, are GMO soybeans. The vast majority are made for animal feed, then for oil, and they're put in processed foods. We also have 89% of all the corn being grown as GMO corn. Again, the vast majority for animal feed, the next for processed foods and drinks, corn syrup. Cotton, 91% of cotton grown is GMO cotton. That's used for textiles, oil, and the holes in the meals are used for, that's right, animal feed. Potatoes and apples are genetically modified just to be aesthetically pleasing, literally just to reduce the amount of bruising and browning that happens when you cut them open or when they're being processed to be shipped out. This is because people were far too often throwing away their browned potatoes and apples, even though they taste the same. We also have squash, which is not a widely used GMO, but it was one of the first to be made into a GMO. Canola, which again are little flowers, used for cooking oil and margarine and packaged foods. We have alfalfa, exactly, alfalfa, important. I hope you know what that is. I definitely do as a scientist. Used for animal feed. And then we have sugar beets, which are used for, that's right, sugar. How do they get those juicy red beets into granulated sugar that's white as snow? Bleach. But we're worried about the GMOs in our food. And lastly, we have the papaya. Now, the papaya was genetically modified specifically to fight off a certain disease that was killing off all papayas in Hawaii. If they had not created this genetically modified papaya called the rainbow papaya, Hawaii would have suffered greatly in its economic development because it would not have been able to grow and sell the papayas that it was growing and selling. After food, we have the highlight of medicines and medical things that were genetically modified to better society. Like I mentioned before, insulin for humans, human insulin, has been genetically modified to be produced. We also have vaccines, antivenoms, bacteria-derived toxins, immunoglobulins, which is a real word, immunoglobulins. We have monoclonal antibodies, allergens, blood products, and clotting factors, growth hormones, pancreatins, and heparin. All of these are in fact very, very needed in today's society. Lastly, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of GMOs. Now, let's talk about the pros first because that's more fun. We have the fact that they may contain more nutrients and in fact do contain the same amount of nutrients, again, if not more. They grow with fewer pesticides because we modify them to be resistant to insects, so we don't have to use harsh chemicals like pesticides all over our fruits and vegetables. which means that when you eat those strawberries straight out of the basket, because I know you do, you won't be putting pesticides in your mouth. They're usually cheaper because we are able to produce more and produce more often, so the price goes down. They are disease-resistant plants like that papaya I mentioned. They're increased supply, which means we have more to feed more people. They have a longer shelf life. So if you don't get to go grocery shopping until Friday, the fruit that was put there Wednesday is still super delicious and great. And they don't have to put more fruit out, throwing the old fruit away. Wastes. Lowers wastes. And lastly, the best thing that I love is that it's better flavor. That's right. The fruits and the vegetables that you are consuming today are nothing like our ancestors consumed. They are sweeter, juicier, plumper, sour, if you're talking about green apples and green grapes. Altogether, much more delicious. Now, some cons to GMOs include that so all these cons are very much like mights, maybes, could possiblys. Nothing is 100% or even 99.9%. So they might contribute to a rise in allergies. They can prompt allergic reactions from different foods. They may contribute to antibiotic resistance. Some very few amounts of research have linked them to cancer. But what isn't linked to cancer? And very few companies are in charge of all GMO seed markets. Now what this means is basically how America is run, with a whole bunch of companies and products being owned by a very few billionaires that are able to pull strings like a puppet master. And we are living in a capitalist world, and that's how we're going to end up. It's a con because they're able to manipulate who gets to have which GMOs and how much they cost. Now, my take on GMOs, because that's extremely important in news, is that I say, why not? We've had them for centuries, thousands of years, generations upon generations, and look at us. We're still growing, we're still strong, we're still tall. Well, we're not very tall, but we're still strong and we're still growing. GMOs have been able to give us more food to feed more people. And even though our population right now is decreasing, it should increase pretty soon. Our population is also very condensed. So we have cities that are very full of people that need a lot of food to feed them. And GMOs would help produce that. Also, cheaper food is a lot more valuable to someone like me who works 2 jobs and goes to school as a college student. And yeah, that's my views on GMOs. I say they're A-OK. Scientist Sam approved. Now, for the future of GMOs, it is suspected that prices will get lower, that food will be stronger and last longer, and we are working on disease-resistant pigs, bird flu-resistant chickens, dairy cows without horns, and highly productive sheep, probably for consumption, but also for their wool. That was a sheep being shaved. Now we're going to talk about something that kind of is a con and is also in the future section. Now when we make fruits and vegetables that are resistant to specific insects, we get this battle with natural selection. So we make the fruits and vegetables resistant to insects, then the insects adapt and are now able to consume those fruits and vegetables. We then have to go in, remodify those fruits and vegetables so that the insects can no longer consume them, and then the insects again adapt. So will we be able to out-adapt the insects? Will the insects out-adapt us? Will we just start to consume insects so that they will no longer consume our food? The world will never know. Or it might. We'll find out on your next episode of Science in the World. Breaking news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Science Sam, again with 42 years of vetted experience from the University of Science, so you can trust me.